The rain started before the service ended. Soft at first, just a mist curling around the edges of the church steps, then heavier, rhythmic, insistent, like even the sky couldn't keep it in anymore. I didn't bring an umbrella. I guess I didn't think I'd stay that long. Inside the chapel, everyone was dressed in black. Veils, heels, polished shoes. The floral arrangements were expensive and overdone, an ocean of lilies and roses drowning out the scent of the wood pews and incense. But I only saw one thing: the casket. Dark mahogany, closed, topped with the same pale pink roses she used to trim from the garden herself. Grandma never liked lilies. I sat in the back. No one asked me to move closer. No one said my name. They hadn't since the night she passed. Aunt Clarice and Uncle Gerald were up front, dabbing their eyes like they'd lost their anchor. Kendra, Jasmine, and the other cousins were seated near the aisle, perfectly arranged like a bridal party. Jasmine wore black lace and red lipstick. Too much of both. I hadn't seen them in almost a year, and somehow it still felt too soon. The priest's voice echoed through the chapel. He spoke of grace, of long lives and soft hearts, of legacy. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and let myself remember her. Not in that box, but in her old green cardigan, humming while she peeled apples at the sink. That was the last time she cooked for me. The week before the hospital. Jasmine twisted in her seat and looked back, her eyes narrowing like a cat eyeing something it didn't trust. Then she stood up. "I'd like to say something," Jasmine said. The priest nodded. The room hushed. Jasmine walked to the pulpit like she was on a runway. Chin high, voice steady. "My grandmother," she began, "was a woman of elegance, of generosity. She gave so much, to her church, to her family, to her community, and she loved us all deeply." I watched her say us, like I wasn't part of it. Her voice tightened with emotion, but I knew Jasmine's performances too well. She cried in selfies too. "She was everything to me," Jasmine said, placing her hand on her heart. "She called me her little legacy. She always said, 'You remind me of me.'" I looked down at my lap, fingers twisting the hem of my dress. I knew what Grandma really said to Jasmine, and I knew what she whispered to me when no one else was listening. Jasmine finished her speech with a dramatic pause and returned to her seat. There was a polite wave of tissue dabbing and sniffles. The priest asked if anyone else wanted to speak. I didn't move. No one turned to me, not even once. After the final hymn, people began to stand. Some touched the casket, some kissed their fingers and pressed them against the lid. I stayed in my pew, head bowed, until the room thinned, and then, heels, click, click, click. They stopped right beside me. I looked up. Jasmine's perfume hit first, sweet, sharp, expensive. She leaned down, just enough for no one else to hear, and smiled like a knife. "You're not even real family," Jasmine whispered. "You shouldn't even be here." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat burned with the sudden pressure of it, like if I opened my mouth, something would break. They say if you've ever been betrayed by family, hitting, like, brings peace, subscribing brings clarity, and commenting brings karma to those who wronged you. Try it. And tell me where you're watching from. Anyways. Jasmine walked away before I could recover. Her hips swung like punctuation. I sat there, alone in the pew, surrounded by whispers and closing umbrellas. "Isla?" a soft voice asked. It was Mrs. Pennington, Grandma's neighbor. She looked older than I remembered, her face pinched with something more than grief. "She loved you, you know," Mrs. Pennington said gently. "She always said you were the one who truly saw her." I nodded. "Thank you." That was all I could say without crumbling. Outside, The rain had thickened into a downpour. People rushed to their cars with coats over their heads. I didn't move. Instead, I walked to the casket. Just me now. Everyone else had cleared. I placed my hand flat on the wood. It was cold, slick from the condensation that had slipped in through the cracked stained glass windows. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the dried marigold she gave me last summer, pressed flat between 2 pages of my sketchbook. I laid it beside the roses, bright orange against all that pale pink. "I brought you something better." I stepped back. The tears finally came, but not for Jasmine. Not for the insult, not even for the rest of them. I cried for her, for me, for the quiet between us that would now last forever. Back inside, I waited for the others to leave. Only when the chapel was empty did I walk over to the photo table. Smiling pictures of Grandma, dressed up for Christmas, holding babies, teaching kids how to bake. None of the photos had me in them. Of course they didn't. She used to say, "They think love is just blood. But you, Isla, you're my heart." I touched the glass frame of the one photo I'd taken. Just the two of us, sitting on her porch with a basket of apples. That day she'd said, "This is the happiest I've been in a long time." They'd placed it behind the larger portraits, almost hidden. I moved it to the front. Not for them, just so she could see it. As I turned to leave, I brushed my hand over the silver chain around my neck. The locket was still there. Small, oval, smooth from years of touching. Inside was a note, folded tight, written in her handwriting. I hadn't opened it yet, not fully, not even after she gave it to me at the hospital. "You'll know when," Grandma had said. "It's not for right now. It's for when they show you who they really are." And today, they had. Jasmine's voice echoed in my mind. "You're not even real family." The priest came by with a quiet nod. "You all right, miss?" "Yes," I said, straightening my back. "I'm all right." I stepped outside into the rain, head uncovered. The wind chilled me straight through, but I didn't rush. I walked to my car, slipped inside, and stared at the chapel in the rearview mirror. They'd shown me exactly who they were. And soon, they'd learn who I'd always been. It only took 3 days after the funeral for the family to descend on Grandma's house like vultures. The casseroles hadn't even gone cold before Aunt Clarice was calling a casual gathering to start sorting through her things. No lawyer, no will, just the family, supposedly remembering her by dividing up what she left behind. I showed up because I had to. Not to fight, just to see it for myself. The house looked the same on the outside. White siding, slate blue shutters, wind chimes still hanging, still catching the breeze. But inside, it didn't feel like her anymore. The warmth had gone with her. Jasmine was already there when I arrived, wearing sunglasses indoors and holding a glass of white wine. She was perched at the kitchen island like she'd been born there. "Oh," Jasmine said when I walked in. "Didn't know you were coming." "I was invited," I said. Jasmine shrugged. "We weren't sure you'd want to be involved. You know, since you and Gran weren't technically close in the end." My jaw clenched, but I said nothing. Kendra was there too, rifling through the sideboard drawers, pulling out old linen napkins and floral placemats like she was on a shopping spree. "I called dibs on the antique flatware," Kendra said. "Gran told me once I had good taste." "She said that to everyone," Jasmine replied, sipping her wine. "Besides, I think she'd want me to have it. I was basically her favorite." Uncle Gerald walked past me, arms full of Grandma's photo albums. "You're taking those?" I asked. Uncle Gerald said, "Well, they're family history. And Jasmine's organizing a scrapbook or something." "Did she ask you to take them?" I asked. He blinked at me, then turned to Jasmine. Jasmine said, Gran wouldn't have minded. Honestly, Isla, this isn't the time to be territorial. I wanted to laugh. Territorial? They were boxing up her life like it was a yard sale. I wandered into the living room. The floral couch was covered in folded afghans. My cousin Marcus was sifting through the bookshelf, stacking anything with gold foil on the spine. "Anyone know what we're doing with the piano?" Marcus asked. "It's old," Jasmine said. "Not worth much. Maybe donate it." "She played that every Sunday," I said quietly. "Then take it if you want it," Jasmine said with a shrug. "No one's stopping you." But that wasn't the point. I didn't want a piano. I wanted them to see her, not just what she left behind. They didn't. They saw dollar signs and stories they told themselves. Later that afternoon, Jasmine stood in the center of the living room, one manicured hand on her hip, and said, "Let's just be real. Gran probably left everything to me. I mean, I was the only one who really knew her." Kendra nodded. "She always said Jasmine reminded her of herself." "She called me her little legacy," Jasmine added. "I didn't speak, I just watched them." They believed it, every word. They'd crafted their own mythology, and I didn't exist in it. No one asked where I'd been staying. No one asked if I needed help with anything. They didn't even ask if I was okay. I floated from room to room like a ghost, watching them gut her home. The home that raised me. The only place I ever felt wanted. At one point, I stood in the hallway, listening to Jasmine laugh as she dug through Grandma's jewelry box. She held up a pearl bracelet and said, "Oh, she wore this to my graduation." Kendra asked, "Shouldn't that go to Isla? Didn't Gran wear that when Isla moved into her college dorm?" Jasmine scoffed. "Please, Isla went to community college. It's not the same." I stepped into the room, just enough to be seen. Jasmine blinked. "Oh, didn't hear you." I said nothing, just turned and walked down the hall. Because here's the truth. Grandma had already told me what was coming. 2 weeks before she died, she sat me down in this very house. The oxygen tank hissed beside her, her voice softer than usual. "I know what they'll say when I'm gone," Grandma said. I told her, "I don't care what they say." "You will," Grandma said, "but not for long." She handed me the sealed envelope then, handwritten, heavy, thick with documents. I hadn't opened it yet, not even now. "I'm leaving you the house," Grandma said. "Everything, actually. The accounts, the antiques, the land." I just stared at her. She said, "They won't understand, but you're the only one who ever understood me." That's the difference. Back in the present, I walked into her bedroom while no one was looking. It still smelled like her, lavender lotion and old books. Her reading glasses were on the nightstand, folded neatly. A glass of water sat half full beside them, like she might come back and finish it. I sat on the edge of the bed. The floral comforter creaked softly under my weight. The top drawer of the dresser was where she kept the most important things. I opened it. Inside, tucked between 2 handkerchiefs, was the envelope, still sealed. My name in her handwriting across the front, underlined once. I ran my fingers over the script. Not yet, I thought. Let them talk. Let them fight over the crumbs while they think I have none. From the hallway, I could hear Jasmine calling out, "Anyone know what the silver tea set's worth? It might be a collector's piece." No one responded, but I did smile because they didn't know. Not yet. But they would. I slipped the envelope back into the drawer, shut it gently, and stood. The bedroom window overlooked the backyard. The garden was overgrown, but I could still see the stone bench she used to sit on, right under the dogwood tree. That was our spot, where she'd read to me, where she told me about her own childhood, her dreams, her regrets, where she made me feel like family, not out of pity, but out of love. I whispered, "I haven't forgotten, Grandma. I remember everything, and I would honor it, not by fighting for scraps, but by carrying her memory the right way. The others could keep their pearls, their flatware, their shallow grief. I had something they would never understand. A legacy that wasn't bought, it was given. And I was ready, just not yet." I was 9 when I lost both my parents. The crash was sudden. One minute I was coloring at the kitchen table with my dad's old baseball cap on backward. The next 2 officers were standing in our doorway, hats in hand, voices low. After the funeral, no one knew what to do with me. My father had no siblings. My mother's side of the family was scattered. Too old, too poor, too far. So I went to live with Aunt Clarice and Uncle Gerald. They called it stepping up. But it never felt like a step forward. Their house had 3 stories, cream walls, and a kitchen that always smelled like lemon polish. Jasmine, their daughter, was 12 at the time. She had her own room, her own bathroom, her own phone line. They gave me the guest room at the end of the hall. No posters on the walls, no name on the door, just an extra bed in a house that never felt like mine. The first night, Jasmine stood in the doorway and said, "So, are you going to cry all night?" I didn't answer. She crossed her arms. "Mom says I have to be nice, but I didn't ask for a roommate, just so you know." That was the beginning. I tried not to make waves. I was quiet, helpful. I did the dishes before being asked, folded towels the way Clarice liked, stayed out of the way when guests came over. But Jasmine made sure I stayed in my place. At school, when people asked if we were sisters, she'd laugh. Jasmine would say, "She's not really family, just kind of adopted or something." I once overheard her telling her friend Savannah, "She's like a charity case. My parents took her in because they felt bad." Savannah whispered, "That's actually so sad." I think that's when I learned how silence can cut deeper than words. Family photos became a source of quiet pain. They never said I couldn't be in them, but somehow I never was. When the camera came out, Jasmine pulled her cousins close. Clarice called for family only. Uncle Gerald focused the lens. I held the coats, or the dog, or the punch bowl. In the Christmas photo of 2006, I'm in the corner of the mirror's reflection, holding a tray of cookies. That's how I existed in their world, a blurry outline at the edges of their perfect portraits. Birthdays were the worst. Jasmine had parties with themes, bouncy castles, ice cream bars, photo booths. I handed out plates, filled cups, cleaned frosting off the floor. One year, Clarice told me, "Why don't you help serve the cake? Jasmine wants to feel special." When I turned 12, no one planned anything, not even a cupcake. I came home from school, hoping maybe someone had remembered. Grandma did. She showed up at the front door with a little white box tied in red ribbon. Grandma said, "Don't tell them I brought it. I know how your aunt gets." Inside was a single chocolate cupcake with a candle already in it. We sat on the back porch, and she lit it with a matchbook from her purse. Grandma said, "Make a wish, Isla." I didn't even know what to wish for. That night, she stayed late and taught me how to make her favorite soup. She asked me what books I was reading, what I wanted to be when I grew up, and if I still drew. "Let me see your sketches," Grandma said. I hesitated. I hadn't shown anyone in months. She insisted. When I brought out my crumpled notebook, she flipped through each page like it was treasure. Grandma said, "You see the world differently. That's a gift." I asked her, "Why doesn't anyone else see me?" Grandma looked away for a second. Then she said, "Some people only see what fits in their picture frame, but you?" She touched my chest gently. "You don't need a frame." That was the night I stopped trying to belong to them. I started trying to belong to myself. Grandma made a habit of it, slipping me books, asking real questions, giving me hugs that lasted a few seconds longer than I expected. One Christmas, she gave Jasmine a bracelet from a fancy department store. She gave me a box of art supplies and a note that said, "Keep creating your world. One day they'll wish they'd seen it." I kept that note. It's still folded inside a sketchbook I never show anyone. Even in her presence, I felt the difference. When Grandma praised me, Clarice would say things like, "You're spoiling her," or "Jasmine worked hard for her grades too." But Grandma never stopped. She was the one who came to my middle school art show. She was the one who helped me apply for a summer workshop, even though Clarice said, "It's not practical." She came to my community college orientation, bought me a toaster for my dorm room, and left me with a hug that didn't feel like an obligation. That's why losing her hurt so much. Not because I lost a grandmother, but because I lost the only person who ever chose me. I promised myself that I'd leave someday, that I'd build a life where no one could erase me from the photos. But I never thought I'd have to do it without her. Not like this. Now, standing in the hallway of her house, listening to Jasmine lay claim to everything, I realized how deep the injustice ran. They didn't just steal the spotlight. They refused to see me at all. And yet, Grandma saw everything. And that was going to matter more than they could ever imagine.
The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and quiet judgment. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls. Every surface was polished, heavy, intimidating. The kind of room where people didn't raise their voices, where power lived in paper and ink. The chairs were arranged in a neat semicircle around a long walnut desk. I chose the farthest seat in the corner, the one closest to the door. I didn't want to be front and center. I didn't want to be seen, until I was. Jasmine walked in fashionably late, her heels clicking like punctuation marks across the wood floor. She wore a slim black coat with gold buttons and sunglasses, even though we were indoors. Jasmine said, "Sorry, I had to move a few things around. I've got an event later this evening." Aunt Clarice murmured, "Take your seat, sweetheart." Jasmine sat near the middle, crossed her legs, and placed a leather handbag on the chair beside her. "Saving that for anyone?" asked Marcus, half joking. Jasmine replied, "Yes. For my inheritance." They all laughed. I didn't. The lawyer, Mr. Halbrook, cleared his throat. He was in his 60s, thin, and looked like he hadn't blinked since 1997. Mr. Halbrook said, "Thank you all for coming. As you know, I've represented your mother, grandmother, and aunt, Mrs. Margaret Dorset, for nearly 3 decades. She requested a private will reading for family only. There will be no digital recording. What is read here is final and legally binding." Aunt Clarice interrupted. "We're assuming this is just a formality. My mother already discussed most of her wishes with Jasmine." Jasmine added, "Yes, she was very clear about who she wanted the house to go to. I even helped her look at renovation ideas." Mr. Halbrook didn't blink. He said, "I'll begin." He opened the envelope with a slow, deliberate motion and unfolded the papers with care. The silence in the room pressed against the windows. Mr. Halbrook read, "To my beloved granddaughter Jasmine." Jasmine straightened her back. Her mouth curved into a smug little smile. Mr. Halbrook continued, "I leave this letter. I hope in time you'll understand why." The room froze. Jasmine blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Mr. Halbrook looked up. "Mrs. Dorset left a single handwritten letter for you, Jasmine. It is sealed. I am instructed to give it to you upon the conclusion of this reading." Jasmine said, No, that's not right. She told me I'd get the house and the garden." Mr. Halbrook resumed reading. "To my granddaughter Isla Dorset, whom I raised and loved as my own, I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes the house, all furnishings, bank accounts, savings bonds, heirlooms, jewelry, the garden lot, and the trust fund left by her grandfather, Franklin Dorset. I didn't move, not a breath, not a blink. Clarice gasped. Uncle Gerald turned red. Marcus let out a sharp exhale. Jasmine stood. "This is a joke. This can't be legal." Mr. Halbrook said, "It is legal." And notarized. I oversaw the documents myself. Jasmine shouted, "She was confused. She was in hospice. She didn't know what she was doing." Mr. Halbrook replied, "Mrs. Dorset made these changes 6 months before her final hospitalization. She was lucid, articulate, and specific. There were 2 witnesses, both certified, and 1 medical professional present during the signing." Clarice said, "But Isla?" She barely spoke to Isla the last few months. I finally spoke. "That's not true." They all turned to look at me. For the first time, maybe in my whole life, they looked at me instead of through me. I said, "We spoke every day. You just didn't notice." Jasmine snapped, "You manipulated her. You made her feel guilty for taking you in." I stood slowly, calmly. I said, "She chose who treated her like family. You all chose differently." Jasmine picked up her handbag and threw the chair aside.
"This is theft," Jasmine shouted. "You think this makes you better than me? It doesn't. You're still the outsider. You'll always be the outsider." Mr. Halbrook said, "Miss Dorset, please. If you'd like to read your letter privately." "I don't want your stupid letter," Jasmine screamed. "Keep it. Keep all of it. I hope the house rots." She stormed out, heels slamming against the floor. The rest of the room stayed silent. Kendra looked dazed. Aunt Clarice muttered something under her breath. Uncle Gerald stared at the carpet like it had betrayed him. Mr. Halbrook placed the documents into a leather folder and slid them across the table to me. Mr. Halbrook said, "These are copies for your records. I'll file the originals with the estate office tomorrow." I nodded. "Thank you." I turned and walked toward the door, my heart beating calmly now, strangely steady. At the threshold, I paused. They were still watching me, not saying a word, so I looked back just once and said, "She's not gone. She's just somewhere better." Then I left without looking back. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. The air smelled like late spring and lemon blossoms. I had the keys in my coat pocket. But more importantly, I had the truth, and I didn't need their approval anymore. I moved into the house in silence. No housewarming party, no announcement, no selfies from the porch. I parked my small dented sedan in the driveway and carried my things in box by box. The rooms felt too large at first. I slept with the bedroom door cracked open like I used to when I was a child, half expecting Grandma's slippers to pad down the hall, her voice humming low with a tune only she remembered. But the house was quiet, peacefully so. The first thing I unpacked wasn't clothes. It was my sketchbooks. I placed them on the old bookshelf in the sunroom, the room Grandma used as her art studio. The walls were still lined with her dried paintbrushes and neatly labeled jars of buttons, ribbons, watercolor pencils. Everything in its place, everything waiting. I stood in the middle of that room for a long time. The afternoon light poured through the windows, casting golden stripes across the hardwood. I whispered, "We're going to keep it alive, Grandma." I promise that was the beginning. I didn't want to live in a house I couldn't fill with purpose. And I didn't want to wear her legacy like a crown. It didn't belong on a pedestal. It belonged in motion, in hands, in the spirit of creation. So I transformed the studio into something more. I started small. I put up flyers at the library, community center, laundromats. Creative haven. Free weekend art classes for girls. A few curious faces showed up the first Saturday. a pair of shy 12-year-olds, a high school senior who didn't say much but clutched her sketchpad like armor. I didn't ask about their stories, I just gave them paint. The second week, more came. By the third week, I had to bring in folding chairs. I invested some of the inheritance, not just in art supplies, but in people. I hired a retired teacher, a trauma-informed counselor, a local artist who'd grown up in foster care. We called it the Marigold Room. Grandma always said marigolds were the toughest flowers. They bloomed in poor soil, bright and proud. The name stuck. The local paper caught wind of it after a social worker mentioned our program at a city council meeting. A young reporter came by with a camera and a notepad, asking questions. She asked, "What inspired this?" I said, "A woman who taught me that love doesn't have to be loud to be real." The article came out the following Sunday. From quiet girl to community leader, Isla Dorset honors her grandmother's legacy with art and grace. They included a photo of me standing in the garden, hands streaked with paint, surrounded by laughing girls holding handmade marigold crowns. I didn't know it would go viral. By Monday, we had grant applications coming in, donors, emails from parents, requests to expand the program. It all grew faster than I expected, but I never lost sight of what it was for. Meanwhile, the silence from my extended family was deafening. Jasmine hadn't spoken to me since the will reading, but I saw her name pop up on a gossip site one morning. Influencer Jasmine Lancaster drops sponsorships amid controversy over fake giveaway. I didn't read the details. I didn't need to. A week later, a follow-up article. Family feud? Sources claim tension over disputed inheritance at heart of social media meltdown. That one I did read. They called her the spurned heiress. Said she was blindsided by a lesser-known family member who had no prior claim. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to correct them, because I wasn't building anything to prove them wrong. I was building something that outlived the question. Every Saturday, I stood at the center of the Marigold Room and watched girls dip their brushes in bright yellows, oranges, reds. I saw confidence bloom on the faces of kids who had only ever been told to stay quiet. I saw walls come down, replaced with possibility. One of the girls, Tessa, tugged on my sleeve during cleanup one day. Tessa said, "Miss Isla, if I get really good, do you think I could teach here someday too?" I smiled. I said, "I hope you do." That afternoon, I walked through the garden, fully in bloom now. Marigolds spilled over the borders, the dogwood tree stretched tall, finally healthy again. The stone bench beneath it had been scrubbed clean, its surface warmed by the sun. I sat down, just like we used to. I closed my eyes, tilted my face upward, and breathed. It didn't feel like a throne. It felt like home. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to belong. I saw her before she knocked. Jasmine's car pulled up to the curb and idled for a long moment. Engine humming, heat rising off the hood like a final defense. I stood just inside the front window, the Marigold Room quiet behind me, brushes drying in the sink. She stepped out slowly, sunglasses hiding her eyes even though it was cloudy. She walked up the path she used to ignore. The one she once said was too overgrown, too cluttered. Now it was blooming. Marigolds on either side, Grandma's dogwood reaching over like a blessing, wind chimes singing softly in the breeze. Jasmine stood on the porch, shifted her weight, then knocked. 2 short raps. Hesitant. I opened the door. Jasmine said, "You've redecorated." I said, "Would you like to come in?" She didn't answer. Just brushed past me into the foyer like she still owned the air. Inside, her heels echoed on the hardwood. She looked around like she was trying to remember where everything used to be. Her gaze landed on the framed article on the wall, the newspaper feature, yellowed slightly at the edges. Jasmine read the headline aloud. From quiet girl to community leader. I said nothing. She turned, arms crossed. So you live here now? Yes, I said. In her house, Jasmine said, her voice sharper now. You live in her house, the one she promised to me when I was 15. I didn't respond. Jasmine asked, Do you think that makes you better than me? I looked at her, really looked. Her makeup was perfect, but her skin underneath was pale. Tired. Her posture, once so effortless, had a stiffness now, like she was holding something up that had cracked beneath the surface. I said, No. I think it makes me someone she trusted. Jasmine's lips parted, but no words came out at first. Then she dropped her arms and let out a shallow laugh. Jasmine said, My accounts are frozen. I blinked. She continued, Everything's tied up in this ridiculous investigation over sponsorship deals. My fiancé left last month, took the dog, and the Range Rover. I waited. Jasmine added, I'm rebuilding, but I need help. Finally, she looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. Jasmine said, I'm asking for a loan. Just enough to relaunch. Get my name back in the algorithm. I know how to fix it. I just need the boost. I crossed my arms. I asked, Why come to me? Jasmine hesitated. Because you have resources now, and Grandma would have wanted you to help. I walked past her and into the marigold room. Come, I said. She followed. The moment she stepped inside, I saw her shoulders tense. The walls were covered in murals, painted by the girls who came every weekend. Butterflies, flowers, portraits of strong women. The shelves were lined with student sketches, award ribbons, photos. There were voices from the hallway, 2 girls giggling as they packed up supplies. Jasmine turned toward the sound, then back to me. This is what you do now? Jasmine asked. I nodded. This is what I've built. Jasmine said, It's nice. But you could be doing more. I tilted my head. More than this? She waved vaguely at the room. You could use the inheritance to invest, flip properties, open a real gallery, make a name for yourself, instead of whatever this is. I let the silence hang. Then I said, I'll help you. Jasmine's face lit up. Really? I nodded. But not with a loan. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I said, You can work here, help teach, help organize, be part of something real. Jasmine blinked. You want me to work here? I said, yes. Come every week, show up, share what you know. You're good at branding, right? We need help with outreach. Jasmine stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then she said, I'm not some charity case. I met her gaze. I said, Neither was I. The words hung in the air like smoke, not angry, not bitter, just true. Jasmine looked around the room again, slower this time. Her voice softened. You really think I'd be good at this? I said, That's not up to me. That's up to you. She looked at the window, the mural of marigolds, the girls laughing down the hall. Then she stepped back, like the space itself made her nervous. Jasmine said, I'll think about it. I said, Take your time. She turned to leave, paused at the threshold, and looked back. She opened her mouth, then stopped herself, closed it, nodded once, and left. I stood in the quiet after she was gone, the air heavier somehow. But there was something else too. Something unspoken. A shift. The next day, I found her standing outside the garden gate. She didn't come in, not yet, but she was closer than she'd ever been. She came back on a Tuesday morning. It had been 3 weeks since the last time I saw Jasmine standing at the garden gate, silent and uncertain. I hadn't expected to see her again, not really. I'd told myself not to hold hope where history had taught me better. But there she was. No sunglasses this time, no dramatic entrance. Just a canvas tote bag over her shoulder, hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She wore sneakers and no makeup. She looked like someone trying to start again. Jasmine stepped inside the front door of the Marigold room and said, "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to help, if the offer's still open." I looked up from the stack of grant papers I was organizing. I studied her face, not hardened, not bitter, just tired. I said, "The offer's still open." She exhaled, almost like she'd been holding her breath since the will reading. I showed her where the supplies were kept, introduced her to a few of the girls, and gave her a simple task: organizing old project folders. That first day, she didn't say much. She worked quietly, occasionally glancing around the room with a strange sort of curiosity, like she was seeing color for the first time. The girls didn't know who she was. To them, she was just Miss Jasmine, volunteer helper, the one who always smelled faintly like vanilla. Over time, Jasmine kept coming back. Not every day, not always on time, but enough that we noticed the difference. She stopped checking her phone during class. She started asking questions, real ones. She learned the girls' names, laughed at their jokes, brought in a box of used markers and journals she found during spring cleaning. One afternoon, I passed by the supply closet and overheard her talking to 12-year-old Gia. Jasmine said, "I used to be really into photography, but I got caught up in the numbers, the likes, forgot why I liked it in the first place." Gia said, "You should take pictures again." "But not for them, just for you." I smiled and kept walking. Jasmine never apologized, not formally, not with words. But sometimes change doesn't sound like "I'm sorry." Sometimes it sounds like showing up on a rainy day with a box of watercolor sets and saying, "I thought the kids might like these." The rest of the family started to shift too. Kendra reached out first, sent me a polite message on social media after seeing the newspaper feature. Kendra wrote, "Didn't know you were doing all this. Looks like Gran would be proud." I didn't respond. Aunt Clarice mailed me a Christmas card that year with a brief line penned in shaky ink. "Hope you're well. We think of you often." It wasn't much, but I didn't need much. I didn't crave their validation anymore, because every Saturday I walked into a room full of voices that saw me. Kids who didn't care about bloodlines or last names or what I did or didn't inherit. They cared that I showed up, that I listened, that I believed in them. Jasmine kept coming, sometimes with supplies, sometimes with stories, sometimes just with presence. She still had sharp edges. She still flinched when someone brought up her old life. But the pretense was gone, and in its place, something new had begun to grow. One spring evening, we hosted our first student exhibit. The garden was lit with strings of lights. Parents, teachers, neighbors, all came to see the work the girls had created over the year. Paintings, poems, mixed media sculptures, laughter spilled out of every room. I stood near the back, letting the others take the spotlight. Jasmine walked up beside me. Jasmine said, "You made this happen." I said, "They did. I just made space." She nodded, and we stood in silence for a moment, watching one of the girls explain her collage to a group of smiling adults. Then Jasmine pointed to one of the canvases on the back wall, a painting of a young girl sitting beneath a tree, its branches wide, protective, filled with marigold-colored blossoms. Underneath it, a small brass plaque read, "For the woman who made me feel like I belonged. ID." Jasmine's voice was quiet. Jasmine said, "That's Grandma's tree, isn't it?" I nodded. She used to sit there every afternoon, Jasmine whispered. I forgot what it looked like. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. On the far wall, we had mounted a wooden frame with an excerpt from one of Grandma's old journals. I'd found it tucked between recipes and old pressed flowers. Burned into the wood were her words. Family is who makes you feel like you're home. People stopped to read it throughout the evening. Some smiled, some teared up, some took photos. I just stood there and watched. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in the marigold room. The lights were off except for the string of bulbs outside casting soft amber shadows on the floor. I ran my hand along the edge of a bench and looked out at the tree in the garden. The wind swayed its branches gently, like it was waving goodnight. I didn't feel like a girl left behind anymore. I didn't feel like the shadow in the family portrait, or the charity case, or the one not invited to speak. I felt like someone who had been loved deeply and had passed it on. Someone who had turned pain into a path and rejection into a room filled with light. She gave me that. Now I give it to others. And that's enough.